Good morning, everyone. How are you? This is Mark Fisher, owner of the Emmy Fisher Funeral Home, and we're here with episode number 10, Supporting Children Through Grief, Strategies to Help Cope with Grief. In our society today, we're seeing a lot of craziness. Children, when I say children, I mean anywhere between, honestly, 17 down. They're seeing grief and death in ways that we never imagined back in my day. As I've told you, I was born in the 60s. We didn't have the gun violence, we didn't have the drugs, we didn't have a lot of the gangs and stuff like that we're seeing today. We're not seeing none of that. So, right now, we're going to go into that a little bit to see what's happening. We're going to talk about death, we're going to talk about grief, we're going to talk about how it affects our children. We have to support them. We have to learn to support ourselves as adults as well. Now, everybody processes grief differently. And because of that, it has to be kind of individualized as well. So today we're going to talk through some strategies. We're going to talk through some methods. We're going to also go through how the school systems help, because they do. Whenever there's a tragedy, the school system will jump in and they will help. Now, let's go into this a little bit. You know, we always start with something that's a little bit different. And then this differentness, here we go again today. Let's take a look. Yeah, this gentleman is standing up for viewing at his own service, dressed in red, standing for his viewing as the people stand around him. Look at it. Something a bit different, yes, all day. Funeral service around the world. Let me take you to a little second clip before we get into this. Yeah, at the cemetery. It's a time and place for everything. As the Bible says in Ecclesiastes, there's a time and a place for everything, every emotion, every action, time and a place. At the cemetery, I have no comment. I cannot tell people what to do, but these are things that go on in the funeral industry today that we have to, I'm not going to say cope with, that we work through. To say work through will be a better way to put it, to work through. Here's a last. Elegance, class, dignity, different, with the top hats, tails, and the bow tie. Whole different set of normal, but it's nice. As you all know, I come from marching band, so anything in step and in sync and multiple people doing it, I tend to like that a little bit, because it requires an internal counting and a thinking, and everybody must be on the same page. Enough of that. Let's get into it. As I said, in this episode, we're going to explore how to support children through the difficult journey of grief, especially in communities where we're seeing a lot of domestic violence, a lot of gang-related violence, a lot of drug-related deaths and instances. We as adults have a difficult time processing this, so as a child or someone younger, you know it's even more difficult. You know it is. Number one, they don't have the coping mechanisms yet that we have to get us to understand exactly what's going on, how to process, and how to deal with it. So we're gonna put our minds together. And if anyone is here, um, leave a message in the chat. I'll respond. We want to engage some community conversation here as to how we can better this environment so that we can raise the next generation a bit better than what's going on now. Children process grief a lot differently than we adults do. They oftentimes have a lot of confusion, fear, and sometimes even guilt when they try to make sense of this loss. Grief affects children a lot of times in waves, more differently than it does us, appearing at unexpected times and often resurfacing as they grow and face new life challenges. Their mind will revert back to that grief. The increased rate of teenage homicides, drug related issues locally, it frames a reality in children that they may not know how to deal with it, honestly. They may not know how to deal with it. So we as adults are going to have to be there to help them. These tragic circumstances can also heighten a child's feelings of vulnerability, and that can add complexities to the grief that they're going through. And these are things that we have to know when we encounter these children, individuals, people of our community that we're trying to make whole so that they can be productive citizens when they then become grown. The goal of today's discussion is to explore practical ways to support the children in processing grief, especially within the context of challenging community dynamics because the community is changing. We need more empathy and an open mind, focusing on creating safe spaces for children to express and work through their feelings. Children's grief often comes and goes, as we said, unlike adults. They may play one moment and have sadness the next, just in a corner, quiet or crying. Another thing we have to remember, especially with the younger ages, they have a limited vocabulary. So they may not be able to verbalize exactly what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And that can lead to behaviors like acting out or complaints about physical pain because now the grief is starting to take on some other avenues because they don't know how to process it. They act out in certain behaviors seeking attention, but it comes from a negative way. We have to know this. Now let's briefly go into some age-specific things. Our younger children, between 3 and 6, sadness can easily be mixed with play, and they may not even grasp the finality of death in what we're saying because they're so young. So we have to be aware of this. Our school-age children, let's say between 7 and 12, they easily can show signs of anger. They can tend to be clingy or sometimes even have struggles in school because they're not focused. Anger. We know that's one of the first phases of grief we go through because we don't really want to believe what's going on. And from anger, we go into denial. Why do they become clingy? Because they feel safe around us. They feel safe around us as a parent, as a community leader. So they want to be around you because it gives them some certainty. Yeah, it's hard. Then as we get older, 13 to grown, 18, they may withdraw. They may act out or try to process the loss independently. They may not want to talk. They may just want to think, reflect, and go into a shell to try to process, and that's not good. Helping our children deal with grief is difficult. I'm going to keep it real. We live in a world and an environment where every time you turn the news on, somebody has been shot. We see yellow tape and crime scenes on everything we look at. And we have to realize that this affects our children quite a bit differently than it affects us and adults. The community context of this. Anytime you have a high trauma situation, gunshot wounds, anything violent like that, it's going to affect. And that's what we're having now. In the past couple of months, we've had two students that were shot at the bus stop in the morning. We're talking 6 o'clock in the morning. Somebody's out here and a child is shot. Now, can you imagine the other kids at the bus stop? Can you imagine when you get to school? Yeah, that's a hard day. That's a hard week. We have amplified grief in children due to those sudden violent deaths, and two, it intensifies it because it's so sudden. It's not planned. We don't know about it. So it amplifies the grief in that child. And as we said earlier, one of the things they will do is begin to act out. And in acting out, we now see behaviors that we don't want to see, which sometimes can lead to retaliation to make things worse. The urgent support we need now has to come from everybody. Community-based support systems for children in high-risk areas are mandatory. It's the only way to get them back into emotional health so that we can then be a community of healthy, grieving citizens versus retaliatory, trying to make sense of. It's something we have to work with. Now, one thing we have to do is learn how to talk to our children about death. We need to be honest and, of course, keep it age appropriate. You cannot talk to a 5-year-old as though they were 15. They're just not going to be able to grasp the concepts, even though they hear the words. They can't put it together yet. We always say, please do not use confusing language or any type of euphemism, grandma's going to sleep. To say grandma's going to sleep and your child sees grandma in that casket, they then see it closed and placed into the earth and covered with dirt. Do you think they may be afraid to go to sleep that night? Probably. Because they're thinking they may go to sleep and never wake up again. It's better to be honest and tell the truth. Grandma has died, meaning she will never come back again. We have to live with this and process it and find a way to go forward. And the most important thing, we have to let them know it is normal to feel this sadness, this anger, whatever emotion they're going through. We need to learn to validate some things versus try to brush them under the rug. Back in my days, little boys coming up, we were told, boy doesn't cry. No, you got to be strong. You got to be a man. Yeah, but there are times when things happen and you feel broken, and a tear may need to be shed because you are human. So we need to learn to let the children know this is normal to feel like this because you love them. This person had a very important part in your life. Something to think about. Any questions? Okay, we got 3 people on the live this morning so far. Thank you. We need to also learn to create safe spaces for the expression of feelings and emotions. A lot of times we don't do that. We're so stern, we're so strict. We want that child to act almost as a Marine at Camp Lejeune. That's not real life. We have to open communication. We have to foster a safe, judgment-free environment for that child to share its thoughts. And the most important part for we adults is to make sure that it is judgment-free. We like to push our beliefs and thoughts on to people and make them think that that's the way the world's supposed to go, but no, it's not. Everyone is an individual, and we express grief, we express happiness in different ways. Another thing we need to do is express some type of outlet, like art, writing, talking, journaling. Many times we can't get the words to say what we're feeling, but if we were to pick up a pen and paper, we may can write them, we may can draw a picture or a scene. I was a trumpet player. You may want to revert back to your instrument. Just pull it out and let the expression come through. The things you can't say, let it come through the bell of the horn. Anybody that's a musician, you'll know what I'm talking about. We as adults in the community also need to monitor the behavior. Knowing that the child is going through this, just watch them. Observe them for any changes that may suggest grief. Then we can talk to them. We can work with things because if they have suppressed it, it's going to show in some action because the mouth didn't say it, the body can't hold it. They're going to get slow. They're going to not be engaged. They're not going to want to talk. But you're going to see a difference in the behavior of that child if going through this type of situation. We're going to help the children find meaning in the loss, amid the loss, rather. Everything happens for a reason. The final outcome may appear negative, but in that, we have to find the positive and learn to go forward. We need to learn to explain life's cycles with compassion. Everything is not cut and dry, A, B, C, D, E, F. We would want it to be, but that's not the way God made it. So we're going to have to be able to verbalize the cycles of life with these children, let them know exactly what to expect, how it's going to work. Nobody here is going to live forever. And we can honestly say that modern day television and movies has messed this up. You'll see someone killed on an episode of a show tonight, and they'll reappear on another show next week with another name, be another character. That's TV. That's not real life. No type of way. We're going to have to learn to get the children to talk about the positive ways that that person touched their life. We're going to have to get them to dig deep into their soul and remember the good things, the good times, the good days, the good everything. Because that's the part of the person that you're going to carry with you the remainder of your life. That's the part that's going to help you build compassion. It's going to help you understand with more clarity and stop the anger. Just keeping it real. Another thing we can do to help them cope is provide keepsakes, memory boxes, a journal written as we said. We got little jewelry that you can wear a piece of your loved one around your neck or with you at all times to have that sense of closeness. But the main thing we're going to have to get them to understand is that when the physical body is no longer there, the memories that they have is what they're going to need to focus on to get them to this healing process, because it's not going to be easy initially. It's not even for an adult. But this is how we start the process of teaching and learning. Now, anytime you're dealing with traumatic loss from homicide or drug overdoses, that's a little more complex grief. Violent loss can intensify grief because it poses so many questions as to why, how, who, what. It brings police investigations into the scene, which I'm not going to say hinders the grief, but it changes the grief because now you have a legal system that you have to go through. A lot of people don't think about that. Anything violent creates a traumatic effect on you in a way that nothing else will. To see certain things happen right before your eyes can change you in such ways that you will never be the same. We have to emphasize counseling and support. We as a community, and I'm going to now go, yeah, I'm going to be real. I'm going to keep it real, real. We as African Americans put a stigma on professional guidance on mental health. That's wrong. Sometimes we need professional guidance and professional prescribed medications to keep us where we need to be. We need to consider that. Maybe our children need to talk to someone sometimes. And we have to assist them in separating the trauma from the memories of their loved one. As the days go on and we go processing, of course, we're going to remember what happened. So-and-so was hit by a vehicle or whatever. But now let's talk about the positive and the good we had with this person. And that will then begin to outweigh the trauma in time prayerfully. But these are processes. None of this happens overnight. How do we separate trauma from grief? Lord have mercy. If it could be done overnight, the whole world would be smiling, but it's not that easy. The first thing we need to do is validate the children's feeling about the traumatic loss. Listen to what they have to say. Know that what they're feeling is real. They're not going to feel what you feel. We're all individuals. We need to focus on uplifting memories to honor the loved one. As we begin to do that, the trauma will start to fade a little bit prayerfully. We then need to help the child understand that grief and trauma can coexist because it has happened. And because this trauma has happened, you can't just jump in the grave as well. Your life must go on. You must trust in a supreme being of some sort to give you the strength and the hope to continue forward. We need to use some therapeutic tools to help them separate it. As we said, art, journaling, maybe their favorite hobby or activity, but they need to engage in something to take the mind to another place so that these emotions can start being processed. The professional support. If in school, go to your school counselor, your school nurse. They then can refer your parents to the necessary help that you need. Because if the child is at home acting out 24/7, it's not going to be a good day. It's not. We have to help. The families are going to have to learn to communicate to children better to start to help them. We then have to give them the emotional support that they need. Ensure that we provide a safe space for them to express their feelings. We need community resources because sometimes, most times, we can't do it alone. We need to connect families with grief counselors and support groups for additional help. We need to search our communities to see if we have any support groups like this because I'm not aware of any right now. Maybe we need to start one, and if anyone on the live or comes in and wants to have ideas of how do we do it, I'll help you with it because I know it's a need. I will gladly help you with a project like that. Our schools, they're doing the best they can. Underfunded. We don't have enough teachers. You all know what's going on with education. But they're doing the best they can. But the child needs to be there. And if you need your counselor or whatever, go to them. That's why they're there. Some coping mechanisms for children and teenagers. Open dialogue. We need to get them to talk. If we don't know what's going on in their head, how do we know what they're feeling? So the easiest way is to get them to talk to us. Let's ask them questions. We need open dialogue. If we could help establish a routine where they know at this time on this day this is going to happen, on this day at this time this is going to happen, a routine can give you some sense of comfort and stability. That's somewhere to start. We can introduce activities like exercise, hobbies, instruments, whatever, but some activity to take the mind off of the grief while still being productive and growing in some type of way. To just sit back can play a video game and be immersed in that for 2 or 3 hours. That's not helping. You're really going into a virtual fantasy world and engulfed in that for a couple of hours. But when you turn the game off, guess what? The grief is back. That's more of just a distraction. We got a few personal coping mechanisms as well. Spiritual grounding. We need some more faith-based practices. See, when I was coming up, Mama made you go to church on Sunday. You had no choice. Drag you up out the house by the back of your head if she had to, but you're going. I don't think we have the spiritual grounding that we had decades ago. We need to go back to that, if not through going to a church, opening up the Bible and just reading God's word and having some connection with some supreme being. Counseling is another coping mechanism. Professional help. Professional help. The next, meditation, or just introducing mindfulness. It can do a world of goodness to help. When I say mindfulness and meditation, things as simple as being grateful for the moment that we have right now. Being grateful that God woke us up. He is allowing us to breathe, be productive. Yeah, we may not have everything we need or want today, but we're here with an opportunity to go forward. And that's the type of resilience we have to instill in our children, because every day will never be a perfect day. You must be living in a sim somewhere. And even in a simulator, every mission ain't perfect. Life is life. It's up, it's down. We adapt, we learn, we trust God, we go forward. The importance of addressing the grief in children, that's the first thing we have to do, is know that it's there. So when we have the death in the family and we notice this child is acting differently, or maybe they aren't yet, they're trying to fool us. No, they're grieving. And we have to recognize and validate that grief to help them go through it. Community support is also a big part of this. We don't have all the answers to everything. That's why we go to doctors. That's why we go to lawyers. That's why we go to someone to help us. So we do need support of other entities to help us learn what to do. And the community as a whole has to realize we have a problem. It cannot be fixed overnight. We have to learn to be differently with our children. We're going to have to learn to talk to them. Listen to them. Not preconceive what they're thinking and already have the answer for them, but listen to what they have to say. And talk through things with them, because if I don't know where your mind is, how do I really know what's going on? We're going to need to take different ways and methods of operating in order to be successful. So we can produce children that when they're our age and grief comes and they have children, they can handle it. They won't be shaken. They won't rock. Because life is going to get harder. Every generation suffers a little bit more. Technology changes. People change. The world changes. Nothing gets easier. So we need to build this foundation. I say we start now. That's all for this episode. How to help support our children through loss. Few strategies we laid out. A little overview. We need to validate and listen to what they're saying. Validate their feelings by knowing that they're really going through it. After listening to them, we then need to try to suggest some type of activities or something, journaling, writing, hobby, to keep them active. We need to try to have some type of schedule that they're on so that they know certain days, certain times, certain things are going to happen, and because of that, that creates a consistency. And we need our community to pull up the rear and be a support system for any child, any student, any adult that's in our community. It's our job to help. Again, this is Mark Fisher, Perspective the Podcast, episode number 10, Supporting Children Through Loss, Strategies for Helping Kids